Special Saints OTA show here, sponsored by Tulane Doctors. It's Jim Derry along with Rod Walker to talk about what's going on this week, our third show here, and we appreciate the sponsorship. Before we get started, Rod Walker, just remember, today's coverage of Saints Minicamp is sponsored by Tulane Doctors, proudly bringing the future of medicine to New Orleans every day. Find your doctor at TulaneDoctors.com. How's it been going out there at Saints Camp? I know wrapping up this third week of voluntary OTAs before mandatory minicamp starts next week. And obviously, we know what the big news is with Michael Thomas, but just in an overall sense, is anything different this week from what we've seen the first couple of weeks? It seems like it's getting a little bit more involved, I guess. They seem to be more comfortable with what's going on.
Yeah, I would think so. I think the biggest difference this third week would be that there was a little bit more intensity as far as just when they were doing, 11-on-11 drills, team drills. I mean, you could just tell that the guys were really getting after it and a little bit more competitive as far as, I won't say trash talking, but, they were scoring touchdowns and spiking the ball. And somebody dunked one over the goalpost like Jimmy Graham, I guess.
Really?
The other day. So you can just tell the guys are really just starting to get amped up a little bit more as they're, just gotten deeper into OTAs.
One thing I always talk about, I actually talked about it on my podcast yesterday, but every good team has chemistry, and this team has some new components to it. And to me, this is the type, the part of the year, this into early part of training camp where really you start developing that chemistry, especially when you have a new quarterback. So, while this part of the year may not be important for some teams, I think for the Saints, it really is, and especially on offense.
I can't argue with that at all. I think, especially you talk about Derek Carr, a new quarterback who's coming in, and it's amazing to me, like how quickly everybody has just. I mean, and they're not just saying it just because he's a new guy. They really mean it. I mean, they really like what he's brought to this locker room. Everybody just talks about how professional he is, how smart he is. He reminds me a lot of Drew Brees as far as just his demeanor, and as far as his interviews, like. We've had a chance to talk to him twice after the first week and this past week, and he's just really good at answering questions, and he always gives you a lot of insight, like more than and as far as the insight, I mean, he's probably better than Breeze on that aspect of like answering questions. Like he's just really good and just really media savvy, and obviously that doesn't have anything to do with winning football games.
Well, but, you know what? I think Rod, it kind of does actually. Having that demeanor and that there's a. You think of all the really good quarterbacks, and they all had that sort of thing, right? And I'm not saying that the Jameis doesn't or Andy Dalton doesn't, because Andy Dalton was a starting quarterback in the league for a decade, and Jameis was a starting quarterback for 4 or 5 years, and was supposed to have a chance to do it. But it's just there's something about this guy to me that, like you say, he's not. Drew Brees is gone; he's never coming back. We get that, but for the Saints to have something like this, to me, makes a difference.
I think it makes a big difference. And again, I'm not just talking about the receivers who like him. I mean, we talked to Eric McCoy, and he's like who's the center. He's just all in on this guy. And even Jameis, man, we talked to Jameis last week, and he just has the utmost respect for Derek Carr and what he's been able to bring into this locker room already. And I think the most impressive thing about Carr, I think, is just before he got here, he did so much research on these guys. Yeah. I wrote a story yesterday, I guess, on Eric McCoy and their relationship. And, Derek Carr, before he even got here, he was watching game film, and he saw a game film of Eric McCoy from 2020 season. And Eric McCoy was running down the field, blocking for Alvin Kamara. And Derek Carr sends that tape. He sends a clip up. He sends a text message to Eric McCoy. It's like, man, this is the kind of stuff we need. We can get everybody to have this kind of attitude. This team can be really special. So, I mean, just the fact that he did that much research before even arriving here on a center, I mean, just kind of tells you a little bit about who he is and what this means to him to be here.
Before we go forward too, I just want to throw this out there. I think Jameis Winston has handled the last 2 years with absolute class. And I get that, people say, he stayed on as a backup because maybe he had nowhere else to go. But I think he's going to be the best backup in the NFL. I really do. And it doesn't matter whatever the situation is, the way he's handled everything, really not a single negative word and just all positive all the time. I love that. And so if this dude has to step in, I'm going to feel really good about where this team is, if he has to step in.
I agree. I mean, I'd make an argument that, we don't know how good Bryce Young is going to be in Carolina, but I'd make an argument right now that the Saints probably have the best 2 quarterbacks in the entire division.
I think you're probably right.
Jameis Winston. I mean, again, Bryce might come in and blow us all away with how good he is, but right now, I mean, I think Tampa Bay or Atlanta would probably be better off with Jameis as their starter, and he's a backup for the Saints, so that would both well for him.
And I'm not going to go back in time and beat the horse that I killed already, but who knows what happened had Jameis started the last half of the season. That's a whole different story. We won't go there again. All right, I want to talk about Michael Thomas and obviously the big news coming out of OTAs this week that he's back. Now, he's not back in a full capacity. He's not doing everything that you would expect him to do, nor what he will do later on. But the fact that he's back has got to be a huge sigh of relief for some of the big brass in this team, and obviously fans of the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, when it was Tuesday, he just tried it out onto the field. It was practice had already kind of started, but it was the third day. It was a third week of practice. So everybody's kind of like, okay, what's going to happen today? So when Mike runs out, and everybody's like, okay, well, this is the big news for the day. And
right,
he didn't do a whole lot, but just his presence being there. When we hadn't seen Michael Thomas on the field, since week 3 of last season. So just to see him back out there was good. And he didn't go through any team drills but he did some. Most of the time, while the teams were running drills, he'd be in the backfield, just sort of mimicking what he would do on those particular plays. And then toward the end of practice, they did do some sessions where he was just catching some passes from Derek Carr and Jameis, and so it was good just to see him doing that, and we got a chance to talk to him that day, and he talks like he's expecting to be the Michael Thomas that we've seen before, and obviously we've heard that, and again, that doesn't mean anything until we see it out on the field, but it was definitely a sign of things pointing in the right direction.
There's no question. Anytime that he's just out on the field, it changes the mentality of some things. Just a little reminder for you, today's coverage of Saints minicamp is sponsored by Tulane Doctors, proudly bringing the future of medicine to New Orleans. Every day, find your doctor at TulaneDoctors.com. We thank them for their sponsorship. Rod, just having Thomas out there has also got to be for the rest of the receivers. To just what he can bring to them as well, because this whole receiving core, to me, if they get him back, they take a huge step forward, and it just makes it, just a sense of relief, I guess, to see him back out in the field has got to be helping them as well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this team, and we all know what Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed can do. I mean, they're really speedy guys that can stretch the field and do all that. But you need that guy this big guy who can. You can count on this guy if it's 35, and you can ball and great with 2 guys over him. He's still gonna make the catch, and that's what Michael Thomas brings, and it just makes everything better for this team when you got a guy who you can count on like that, and you can throw him the contested pass that he can make them, and they didn't have that guy last season who could do that, and now they have him. So
different on offense, but just obviously different side of the offense. But the running backs now, Kendre Miller, obviously he's still a little banged up from his injury from last year, so he's not doing a whole lot right now. But what have you seen in the running game? Jamal Williams, how does he look, and who has anyone stood out in the running game part of it besides Jamal Williams?
I think it's hard to say on the running game because they're not tackling, so they're taking the handoff, and they're not fumbling the handoff.
Well, that's good.
That's a good thing, right? But hey, I think both of those guys are going to be really good, and we haven't seen Kendre Miller really out there, but man, I guess I didn't realize how he looks, but I mean he's like built apart. I mean, when you see him, you're like, whoa, this guy's is ripped and cut and all that stuff. So I think he has a chance to be really, really special. I think the Saints fans are going to really like him.
Obviously, we can't tell because he's not running the football, but how close does he look in physical stature to Alvin Kamara? He gets compared to Alvin Kamara a lot, so that's why I'm asking, I guess, and I haven't seen him.
No, I don't. When I saw Kamara for the first time, I don't think I had that. I wasn't like, wow, look at this guy.
Yeah.
When you see Kendre, you're going to like, and this is like no pay. I mean, just coming out with a shirt on, his arms bulging, you're like, whoa, this guy's different. So I don't know if I can go with the Kamara comparison because I don't remember having that reaction when I first saw Kamara.
Is it like the first time you and I saw Leonard Fournette back in 2013 at St. Augustine High School?
That's a good comparison, yeah.
It's a very quick short story. Going back to prep because I was in news for a while and I hadn't covered Leonard Fournette. And first game I covered him was week 2 at Covington. And I'm like, I didn't even know what his number was at the time. And I'm like, I wonder if I can spot. Oh, there he is. I didn't need a number to know who Leonard Fournette is.
He's a different kind of guy, man.
Maybe Kendra Miller would be kind of like that. What else have you seen on the offensive side? I'm really interested. My whole thing this year, and especially early and going into training camp, what scares me most, if you're going to root for the Saints or if you're a Saints fan, is the depth on the offensive line. I think, the last couple of years, obviously, Rod, they've had so many injuries there. People going out left and right, missing a week, missing 3 weeks, missing 6 weeks. What do we see there? First of all, how's the health of the starters? Does it look? And do you think that there's going to be a little bit more depth in the O-line this year?
I think there will be some more depth. After they took somebody in the draft, and Nick Salvadori from OTAs. Who
got hurt? Didn't he get hurt already?
Yeah. You look at the offensive line that we've seen in OTAs. Eric McCoy's been the only starter we've seen there.
That's right.
Ryan Ramczyk, these are voluntary. So Ramczyk didn't come. Kevin Throckmorton didn't come. Both of those guys, those are your 2 starting tackles from last year. Cesar Ruiz is rehabbing an injury. Trevor Pennings, he's rehabbing an injury. So you got all these guys that haven't been there. Eric McCoy, I talked to him the other day, and one of the things he said was, he thinks that this time period that he's getting to play with these guys who aren't starters, he said, inevitably this is going to help him because the inevitable is going to happen. He knows that injuries are going to happen to this team. So the fact that they're getting this opportunity to, the fact that he's getting this opportunity to play with some of these young guys, he thinks might help this team out in the long run. But obviously offensive line is an issue that you got to build that depth there. And I think the Saints have done a good job of trying to address that most times. I mean, they get these guys who can swing to different positions, and that always helps when because you don't know who's going to go down.
One thing that Sean Payton always realized, and you can give him credit for a lot of things, but there were things that maybe you didn't see, because people talk about his play calling and all that. To me, he always understood, and I'm not saying Dennis Allen doesn't. I'm just saying there were things that he understood, and Sean Payton understood. You had to have a deep offensive line. You had to have someone that can come in and play, and they were always thinking ahead and drafting. And Trevor Penning was drafted. Now Salvadori, who's going to probably get in there at some point. So Dennis Allen is thinking along those lines. But this team has always been good about showing up that O-line, and to me, the lack of that the last couple of years. Now, when you get 100 injuries, basically, which is what they've had over the past 2 years, that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think they've done the same thing on the defensive side of the ball too, as far as line. I think this team just knows that that's where the games are won, and you got to have depth there, or everything else doesn't even matter.
In the trenches, baby, got to do it. Speaking of that, what about the other side? The defensive line, it seems to me that they have strengthened that position maybe more than any other spot on this team. And a lot of people say that's where they needed the most help. I don't necessarily agree, but that's where some of the experts and pundits have said that. How do you think that's shaping up? How is that looking? Cam Jordan maybe getting some help.
I do think that the interior of the defensive line was a concern. I mean, losing Shy Tuttle and David Onyemata. I mean, those are key pieces of what they did, up front. So, they brought some guys in free agency, and obviously they drafted Brian Bresee in the draft out of Clemson, took him in the first round. So just so many unproven guys we don't know. So we're just going to have to see how those guys end up playing. But, I mean, I think they addressed the issues, and now we have to see, if they addressed it with the right pieces. Obviously, you look at the defensive end, I think they're really good there. When obviously Cam Jordan's been really good. So I got a lot of pieces. Peyton Turner's a guy who, we got to see if he can stay healthy. And, they still believe in him, but if he's not healthy, he's not doing him any good.
If he can, I think he can play. If he can stay healthy. The Clemson kid, when you talk about about Kendra Miller, you think the same thing when you see him? What's
yeah, I mean, he's a defensive lineman. You kind of expect them to be.
Yeah, but he's not your typical interior defensive lineman. It's like, you think of Norman Hand or something when you think of interior, you think of the big wiggle. Right. How many wings can they eat after practice? But, this kid doesn't seem like that. He actually seems like he's a solid athlete that can play 70% of snaps.
That would be a good way to describe him. That's what he looks like. And, he was in there with the first team on Tuesday. We saw him getting in there and getting some good reps. And again, they're not doing a whole lot right now, so you can't really tell. you need to see him we have to see him in a game when or when they do some of these joint practice with other teams, then they get a little bit more physical. But I think he's a guy that, we saw what he could do in college, so I think he's a guy that can be really good.
Isaiah Foskey, we've seen a lot of him out there.
Yeah, he's been around. He's a guy that, another defensive end that, this team just seems to always have these defensive
They really do.
It's probably their favorite position, right? They would find a defensive end and
we talk about O-linemen and with Sean Payton, but I tell you what, and look, you understand it. Dennis Allen's a defensive coach, so he's going to roll in this defensive line. But I think you're going to, as long as he's coach here, I think you're going to see that, and he's going to continue to bring in the defensive linemen as we go on.
They brought in good ones. Most of the guys they bring in are good. The biggest concern again is always just those guys staying healthy. You think back to, obviously Marcus Davenport comes to mind, but yeah, those guys have to stay healthy. But for the most part, they do a good job of scouting defensive ends.
Well, I just got a couple minutes left in the show. Anything else that stands out to you? Again, to me, the whole Derek Carr. I love the quote. The Derek Carr and Michael Thomas thing. How they, they're talking about how they recruited each other. I don't know how necessarily true that is, but I love the fact that and we kind of saw this with Mike with Jameis a little bit, right? And I think he was super excited about Jameis being the quarterback, and then it wasn't the greatest of starts, and then that kind of dissipated, and Michael Thomas disappeared. So I'm taking this with a grain of salt, but to me, this is kind of the story of the first 2 months before the season starts, how these two guys gel, and if they are on the same page, it could be quite a weapon.
Yeah, I think no doubt. You're talking about
Carr and Thomas getting
Carr just talked about talking to him on the phone and just. And again, this is the honeymoon phase. Everything
exactly
now, and so you have to see how it plays out. But right now, I really think that chemistry is. They've built this bond. Even in practice the other day, you saw Carr and Thomas they were just talking. They spent a lot of time just talking together and discussing routes and what what do you see on this play, and in this coverage, what do you see? And so they're definitely building the rapport. It's just going to be a matter of putting it together on the field.
There's no doubt about that. All right, last question. Saints right now 35-1 to win the Super Bowl. We talk about some long shots that we like. It's way early, and this number, you don't have to necessarily bet it now, but we talk about these things, and I think they're I don't know, there's something like 16 or 17 to 1 to win the conference. They're 1.2 to 1 to win the NFC South. Any kind of thing you like? Are you gonna put $2 on something related to the Saints or no?
I'd be shocked if they didn't win the division this year.
Me too, kind of.
To me, if they don't win the division,
it's either them or Carolina.
Yeah, and again, we just don't know about Bryce. We don't know how good he's going to be, but with the experience the Saints have, you got to think they're going to get. The schedule is so favorable this year, and
but for Carolina too.
Yeah, right. Every division has a pretty easy schedule because you're matched up with the AFC South. But I just think with the veterans they have, if they can just take care of the ball and avoid the injuries. Last year, they couldn't force any turnovers, and they committed a lot of turnovers, and which a lot of that people put it on coaching. I don't know if that's coaching, right. But if they can fix those problems, I think on paper this team can be good.
Well, we've been at least I have. I can't say we, because you're not harsh on too many people. If you're harsh on somebody, that means they really deserve it. Okay, it's not like me who just jumps on. So I've been a little harsh on Dennis Allen. I've even been more harsh on Pete Carmichael. But I think in the second year of them together, I'm gonna give them a pass now. I think, and we're gonna go into the season, and we're gonna find out what these guys are really made of. I think, and if you don't see, to me at least, 9 or 10 win season. In fact, I'm gonna go. 10-win season. I think you got to win 10 wins. You're gonna have to get 10 wins to win this division. I know people say you can win it with a sub 500 record, but I don't think that's gonna be the case with these schedules this year. So I think if they don't get 10 wins this season, I think it's going to be a major disappointment for Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael. I just don't know.
No, I agree. I think this is a season. This is kind of make or break for Dennis Allen. I think he has to be successful, and I don't know if that's just winning the division or if they need to go a step beyond that. Because the division, the conference is still. I think the Eagles are going to be really good still. San Francisco will be really good still. So I think that.
But other than that, though, I don't know. Okay, but
right. So I mean, I think it's I don't think if you put money on the Saints to go to Super Bowl, I don't think that's outlandish at all.
Especially if you put 35 to 1, you put $3 on it, you win over $100. So
right.
I mean, that's worth a shot, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. I don't know. I'm not advising to do that yet. We're going to get to the over/under segments on how many games I think teams are going to win. We've been pretty good the last 2 years. We're going to try to do that again.
I'm staying away from that, Jim, because last year I had them.
Yeah, you kind of bombed on that.
I had like the 72 Dolphins last year. So
well, it's like when everyone in the media, and I mean all 27 members of the New Orleans media that Duncan polled, all 27 picked the over. I knew my over bet, which I'd already made. Had I seen this poll before I made the bet, I would have never made it. I knew I was doomed then, but we've done pretty good. I think we've gone something like 60-something% the last 2 years with the over-unders. Overall, we do them out for every team. So we'll see how we do this year. But, Rod, good talking to you, and I look forward to having you on Datitude again pretty soon.
All right, sounds good, man. Thanks as always.
And we want to thank the Tulane Doctors for sponsoring our show. Once again, today's coverage of Saints Minicamp, sponsored by Tulane Doctors, proudly bringing the future of medicine to New Orleans every day. Find your doctor at TulaneDoctors.com, as they have sponsored now 3 shows on the Saints OTAs. We'll talk to you soon. Jim Derry and Rod Walker. Have a good weekend, everyone.
We are Tulane Doctors. Physicians and scientists working side by side to advance academic medicine, develop state-of-the-art medical treatments, and provide inspired patient care throughout the Gulf South. Tulane Doctors, the future of medicine is here.